Hello and welcome to the Pole Position podcast powered by Sports News Blitz. My name is Henry Eccles, F1 writer for Sports News Blitz.
I'm Alexandra. I'm a Sports News Blitz F1 contributor.
And my name is Nicole and I'm the co-editor at Sports News Blitz.
And we're here to preview the Austrian Grand Prix, but also reflect a little bit on the last round in Canada as a build-up. And I think the first place to start really ought to be how will McLaren recover from the incident between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. So it was a battle for P4, not where McLaren are used to be this season. But Norris was on the rear wing of Piastri for a few laps. He was catching. He made a huge lunge into the hairpin, the iconic hairpin at Montreal. Momentarily got ahead, but then Piastri got ahead at the Wall of Champions, only for Norris to make a move that I think many people would agree just really wasn't on, and ended up ruining his race. So, what now, Alexandra? I'll go to you first.
I mean, I really don't know. Because we're seeing this, I think, with Norris, that he gets desperate when he's not in a pole positioning in a winning position, when he's not fighting for those podiums. He sort of does these really reckless, rash moves, and I think the Canadian crash was just a prime example of that. I did wonder at one point if he was going to do like a fake down the inside and go back around the outside. He just misjudged it, but it's not mistakes that should be happening for someone as seasoned as him and someone that's meant to be competing for a world championship, especially with your teammate of all people to be crashing into. He's lucky that Piastri's car was fine and that he was able to finish the race, because otherwise I think McLaren would have had a hell of a lot more to say about that. Thankfully, they still had a car finishing, but I don't know. I hope they can recover from it, but I think it's going to hit Norris's confidence a wee bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was such a shame because you'd think that we'd still have a really tight battle for the championship, but now that's created a big gap. And if Norris keeps on making the mistakes he's been making, that gap is only going to get bigger and bigger. And Red Bull aren't that close to them, so the chances of us having a really tight battle all the way to the final race, where like we really don't know who's going to take it, are just getting slimmer. So McLaren will need Norris to bounce back, and they'll also just need to bounce back because they also just weren't where we thought they'd be for Canada. So hopefully Austria will be a place where they can assert their dominance. If they can, that would be great. So we can keep this battle going, but we'd also love for other teams to get closer, obviously. But yeah, time will tell.
Yeah, I don't think McLaren are going to change anything in terms of their approach. There's no real reason to, with the two drivers so far ahead in the driver standings. But I do think it is important. It could come to be important later down the road in terms of, if Verstappen and well, particularly Red Bull, try and reverse things basically and have a bit of a comeback, sort of like how Norris did last season, where he just started racking up those points. And he starts putting the pressure on, say, Piastri. Then I think McLaren could look back at a situation like this and say, actually, Oscar, he sort of took the back seat last season for Lando. It makes sense to sort of do that this season the other way around. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Alexandra in terms of it. It was a desperate move, really. And it wasn't, it wasn't for P1. It was for P4, and he was going much quicker anyway. It was only a matter of time. It's funny, it was a matter of when, not if. That's what the whole narrative around a clash between the McLarens has been. So yeah, it was needless, and I think it's that's optics more than anything, because I actually don't think it was desperation. I think it genuinely just was, misjudgment. I think it was because Norris, I feel like he has been in a better place recently. He's not been that um, at least in how he's come across in interviews and things like that. He seems a little bit more assured in himself. So yeah, I think it's just really bad timing. And for Austria, he needs to bounce back. He needs whatever that looks like. I mean, you'd imagine McLaren just bounce back and are fighting for the win. Norris should be on that top step really. But Piastri's going strong.
Yeah, and that takes me back to Austria last year when we had Max and Norris clash. And so now it feels so weird that we're not going into Austria, going off of the back of another Norris crash, but this time with his teammates. So yeah, he'll need to not repeat history and actually make sure he's, focused and not making any mistakes like that will cost him the championship this time around, because a lot of people went into this year thinking this is Norris's title to take. So he needs to prove that. We're getting into the middle part of the season, and now is when you really lock in and just show everyone what you've got. So yeah, all eyes will definitely be on him.
Yep. And the biggest beneficiary of that Verstappen Norris clash last year was George Russell, of course, who won at Montreal last round. It was a great weekend from him overall, pole position, and just a commanding race. And also his teammate Kimi Antonelli with his first podium. I guess the big question for Austria though is can they keep it up?
Yeah, good question. Can they? It was really good to see Antonelli on the podium, first podium, and he did it in style. He was really strong, and he handled the pressure well. No rookie mistakes that you'd expect from a rookie. And Russell was, again, as Henry has said, he did really well throughout the weekend. Mercedes were just on top of their game, and they got their strategy right. Their drivers did their part, and we didn't think Russell and Verstappen would give us a clean start, but they did. And Russell took advantage of it and just went on his way, kept a cool head, and won the race in deserving style. So yeah, hopefully they can keep up that momentum and just actually give us a battle for the championship.
Yeah, I think we've been seeing a lot more confidence coming from Russell, and I think this coming into Austria with a Grand Prix win under his belt for this season is just going to keep pushing him. It'll be interesting to see if there's any more sort of off track rivalries with him and Verstappen, as they both seem very good at egging each other on in interviews. Russell's comment about him being like, well, he's only got 1 point left on his license, I thought was quite funny. And I think that also speaks to Russell's confidence. He's feeling like he's got that solid ground in the paddock and on the team to be able to, egg on the other drivers and really get inside their heads and make the competition not just on track. Because he's not got a contract, it's not official for next year. I think all signs are pointing to a Mercedes extension.
Yeah, just on his rivalry with Verstappen. I mean, it is good fun, and I think it has moved into a place where both drivers know that. Like, I think they're getting on okay, really. In little bits of press obligations, but I think they do enjoy the needle at this point. But also it's worth remembering actually that this is probably Russell's last chance to get Verstappen a race ban, because I think the 2 points that Verstappen got last year for the incident with Norris, they're off, they're scrubbed off after Austria. That's how it works. It's a 12-month monitoring period in terms of your penalty points. But yeah, I mean, another thing though is that with Mercedes, Toto Wolff still isn't holding his breath in terms of this, Canada being a huge step forward because of their inconsistencies, especially with temperature on track. But at the same time, at Canada, it was scorching hot. I think they were temperatures of about 50 degrees on track. Although the caveat there is that Canada was probably a little bit less energy track than than Austria, so that'll impact things for sure. But yeah, I mean, just Russell's deserved a win in my opinion because he's been so consistent, and it's gone under the radar. And his win, in a way, went under the radar as well because it was so commanding, and he didn't have any incidents apart from maybe the shenanigans in the safety car. But yeah, I mean, I hope Mercedes, do continue some good form because it certainly makes things a bit more interesting in terms of the constructors.
Especially with having it seems like they've now got a solid both drivers seem really solid in it. I think it's so impressive that Antonelli's managed to get on the podium this early in the season, being how young he was, and you could physically see how young he was compared to the other drivers on the podium when he was upstanding there. So I think they're setting themselves up for a good Austrian weekend. I just hope that they take it and they run with it, and they don't get bogged down on too much of the strategy, and just be like, we've just got to push and we've just got to get through this.
Yeah. Mercedes did well, McLaren struggled, and then we have Ferrari, who
Yes.
is strategy. I don't know. We keep talking about the same things with Ferrari.
I don't think Ferrari knows what strategy means. I genuinely, you look at the choices they make every single weekend, and you just think it can't get any worse, and then it does, and you have drivers literally going, that's not what we agreed on, that's not what I wanted to do, why is no one listening to me? That's never a good sign for the inner workings.
It's not a good look to have your drivers disagree with your race engineers. It's not just the first weekend, it just keeps happening. And yeah, I mean, we had the team come into their team radio and say they wanted to go for plan B, and Charles said he wants plan C. And his race engineer says copy. And you'd think that's them agreeing to go for plan C. And then they call him in and he's very unhappy. So clearly that was them not going for plan C. So very strange, especially after you think back to like Monaco, for example, where there was a bit of a disagreement with what the drivers wanted and what the team wanted, and yeah, we keep doing the same thing over and over again. When is it gonna end?
Yeah, it's either copy, understood, we are checking, or some great panic after some pit stop has happened that shouldn't have happened or something like that. But yeah, I mean, Leclerc, it's not the first time Leclerc's voiced his concerns. It's also not a great look given all of the pre-race chatter that was going on, particularly in the Italian media around Leclerc's future. That was in there somewhere, although probably not as prominent as team principal Fred Vasseur's future. To me, it would seem ridiculous, I think, to change things where we just in terms of where we are in the season. 2026 is on the horizon. Hamilton's relationship with Vasseur as well, that was a big part of why he went to Ferrari. I just think the last thing that team needs is more chaos.
Yeah, because I think that the issues are a bit deeper than just who the drivers are and who the team principal are, because they've changed team principals a good number of times over the years, and then they've had Vettel, they've had Sainz, and now they have Hamilton. Leclerc has kind of been consistent, but the good kind of consistent. It has not been a questionable driver choice for them, and they've had good drivers alongside him. And so it just feels like the issue is so much deeper than just saying, yeah, we need to just get another team principal, or Charles is the problem, he needs to go. Yeah, it just doesn't seem like that's where they should be heading.
Yeah, I think it's been touched on a few times that it seems to be there's a culture in Ferrari that's actually needing a bit of overhaul rather than anything like that. And I think it's showing that the car's not completely undrivable. It's definitely one of the more difficult cars to drive out there on the track, but we had Hamilton out qualifying Leclerc for the first time, I think, this season, then having that unfortunate issue with the groundhog, which was quite sad, and it's like it couldn't be confirmed until after the race. So it's like there is a possibility there. and the drivers are able to sort of get the best that they can out of the car, but it just feels like the team itself isn't wanting the same thing that the drivers are wanting, and that's when the whole relationship falls apart.
Yeah, there's so much friction between the drivers and the team.
Yeah, an interesting actually tidbit that came up in the Canada reaction was Nico Rosberg revealed, I think, on Sky that Ferrari might be considering moving, or at least moving part of their organization to the UK, just because they feel that something's missing in terms of just organization, communication, things like that. That teams that are in the UK seem to get. I mean, most of the grid are UK based now, so that'll be an interesting thread to follow. I'm not sure if it'll happen though, because you think of Ferrari as being, Italy, and
Italian through and through.
Yeah, it would be a bit odd, and I think they did do something like that in the 80s or something, but it just didn't work. It would probably work better now because obviously technology's improved and communication's a lot better. But
I also think now that they've got Hamilton as that connection to the UK. He's huge in the UK. He'll know what's what. But I don't think it needs that dramatic of a move. Like,
no.
Not at this point in the season, and I don't even know the next season's it's a good idea anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think last season was promising. I know we're all disappointed with Ferrari this season, but they made a really impressive comeback last season. They were fighting until the very last race for the constructors. There's solid evidence there that they can mount title challenge. It's just I think there's just been a huge combination of sort of just adaptation being with Hamilton. They've had a lot of bad luck as well in races. It's just I think it's a transitional year, really.
I think so too, and I think if they do actually make the move to have a factory in a base in the UK, it would be a bit of a culture shock for Ferrari, because Ferrari is just, as we've seen, just Italian. Ferrari is so Italian, but it would have its advantages. One, there's Lewis, who will be in an environment where he's so comfortable, and then you have the aspect of people wanting to come into your team, not just because you're Ferrari, but also because, okay, I can still stay in the UK. Because if you have engineers moving from Red Bull or Mercedes, they don't have to make a big life decision, because they're basically home. So it's in a way it would work for them, but if they're open to the change.
Another sort of storyline that's now developing is the midfield battle. Williams have been best of the rest this season, but they've definitely had a snag in the last few races. Combination of, I think, strategy muck-ups and bad luck as well. But it seems to be the veterans that are making a good fight of it. Nico Hülkenberg and Fernando Alonso, 2 consecutive point scores now. Think they can keep it up for Austria?
I mean, where has Sauber come from? Like, that car last year was just a mess, an absolute mess of a car. And now to be, what was it, 8th that Hülkenberg finished? It's just sort of worlds apart, and from a team you don't really expect. I think it speaks a lot for not just at the work that's gone into it, but also Hülkenberg's ability to drive. He's really sort of gone under the radar in the last few years, but he's really come into his own the last few races. And Fernando Alonso with Aston Martin, it's like you're seeing that hint of him from way back when, that driver that's fighting and is fighting back. And I think it's really good. It's nice to see not just stuff happening up at the top, but to have this midfield storylines, to have these drivers that we all know and love and have grown up watching still fighting for points is just, I think it's what makes the sport so great.
Yeah, there's actually a moment in the race where I think Alonso's race engineer told him that he needs to watch his entry into, I think, turn 3 and turn 8, and he was just like, no, we're not testing, we're racing. So it's always nice when you see the veterans and the guys who've been doing this for basically forever having the time of their life and still just going at it. I think my favorite thing about Formula One at the moment is you still have people like Hamilton and Alonso having the drive that they still had back when they were rookies and back when they were fighting for titles against each other. It's really nice to see. And there's Hulkenberg, who was off the grid for some time and then was just called up when someone was sick and all that. And he came up and he stepped up and then he got his way back into F1, and he's proving why the team, Toba, have taken a chance in him. So it's really good to see people who've been around the sport for a long time still, making a name for themselves. Yeah.
It comes for a good time as well for Sauber with Audi coming in next year. It's just really promising because we've looked at this Audi project for a while and we just don't. It's not. There's been nothing really to be excited about because you look at Sauber and they've been dead last pretty much for the last 2 or 3 years. So yeah, I mean they've got some good people in the background too. They've got Matteo Binotto. We were talking about Ferrari team principals, and Jonathan Wheatley, who's the sporting director at Red Bull. Like they've got some serious people there, and whether or not that's having a direct impact right now, I think Binotto probably is, but elsewhere it just is very promising for 2026. They're looking at least like a more serious outfit. And yes, on Alonso, Alonso's back whenever there's a ridiculous driver rumor. Because I've seen that there's some chatter of him going back to Alpine.
I saw that one as well.
You just know everything's going well whenever Alonso has been linked to some move that doesn't really make much sense. But yeah, he's driving brilliantly. Aston Martin, I think, on paper, probably the 5th fastest team now since Imola. They've looked really good. At least Alonso has. I don't know what's happening with Stroll.
I do think we need to talk about that because I'm getting to the point where it's like it's almost embarrassing that he's still in the sport, and it's becoming like it's just because his dad's the team principal. It's becoming more. I think it's looking like that for a lot of people, and there are so many young drivers out there that would jump at the opportunity to be part of the F1 grid. And for someone like Stroll, he doesn't even look like he wants to be there. That it's just like we're continuing dragging him. It feels like we're dragging him through every single race this season, and I don't know if it'll improve anymore coming up for Austria this week. But he just never looks happy to be there. He's always temperamental on the radio. He just seems so done with the sport that was supposedly something that he dreamed of his whole life.
It's such a shame because when you think back to when he joined the sport when he was with Williams and Racing Point, he was on the podium pretty early on in his career and he had some really good races. I remember, I think one of my favorite Stroll performances was in Baku when he was racing with Bottas. It was actually quite good. And he's one of those drivers who came in and he was like, okay, yeah, I come from money, but I've also got something to prove. And then he's just kind of, his performances just haven't been where they once were, and he hasn't followed the trajectory that he had started off so well. So yeah, it's I think for Canada in particular, I think I'm gonna cut him some slack because of the whole wrist thing. But into Austria, he needs to be a bit closer to Alonso. He's been in the team longer. He's supposed to be more comfortable with the team. He's been in the sport for a long time, so he's not a rookie. And yeah, he needs to really prove himself because it's really generally starting to look unfair for a lot of other young drivers who are trying to get into the sport. So yeah, he really needs to up his game.
Yeah, you make a good point actually in terms of his early career. I mean, we were talking about Antonelli earlier. He's the third youngest driver to be on a podium. The two ahead of him, Max Verstappen, unsurprisingly, and Lance Stroll.
Lance Stroll.
Which seems crazy to me, given just how far off a podium he seems now. But yeah, I mean Stroll. It's been a weird season for Stroll because he did start off actually a lot better than Alonso. He was in the points before Alonso, and yeah, then that whole wrist thing came up, and we know that what the official story is there, but there have been a lot of rumors going around that there might have been some damage done because he was a bit upset and maybe threw something. We don't know. That was just what was going around in the paddock. Apparently.
I've heard these rumors as well, but it seems like I don't like. I'm not to buy into whole conspiracy theories, but with the whole Lance Stroll and the wrist thing, there's more than the official line that's being sent out to everyone. I think that much is obvious, especially when like him in interviews. There seems to be a much bigger internal conflict, whether that's in him internally or whether there's actually a conflict between him and his dad, him and his engineers. But I wouldn't be surprised if it came to light that he had lashed out and hurt himself that way.
Yeah, I think his future, although we always think it's relatively secure, I wouldn't be surprised if things changed quickly suddenly, just because of the vibe that's going around at the moment. But we'll see. And that's all I've got. Anything did you guys want to add?
Who are our top 3 predictions for Austria? That's what I want to know. Who's everyone gearing towards? It's starting to become a pretty wide battle. Like, it's not just 2 people fighting for it. There are becoming more and more competitors in this championship race. Who's your go-to, Nicole?
I think Piastri will be back on the podium, but I think it's gonna be a fight between him and maybe Norris, if Norris gets his confidence back up, and the Mercedes drivers. Russell, when his confidence is up, he's gonna do his best to get himself up there. So I think we're gonna have the McLarens and the Mercedes drivers all being in the mix, but hopefully we have the Ferrari in there. I don't think so. Maybe one of them will do something and then it'll all just crumble during the race. But yeah, so maybe Max will be there, and hopefully Tsunoda will start getting a bit closer to his teammates and to the rest of the front pack. But I think it will be Mercedes versus McLaren this weekend. But I think Piastri will actually get back to the top step of the podium.
I think Verstappen wins it. I just do. Okay. I think he's. I mean, he's got 5 wins at Austria. He's the most decorated driver in Austria. It's their home race. He's lucky to be there. In terms of the penalty points.
I think he's always spurred on by the Orange Army, the fans down there. I think whenever they're around, they just give him so much motivation and so much drive that it's the same as like the Tifosi for Ferrari. That just having their presence seems to really spur Verstappen on. So I don't think you're necessarily wrong, even if I don't want you to be right.
I don't think the McLaren thing will get in the way really in terms of the what's happened last race, but I don't quite see Mercedes delivering in quite the same way this week, just because I can't quite get out of my head the idea that they are still inconsistent and I think Austria won't suit them quite as well as Canada. And then I'm just looking at the data, and Verstappen has won many times at Austria. So I think it's not nailed on, but it's not a bad bet.
I'm just gonna say, like, all the ones that are fighting for this, they're all going to have issues, and we're going to see Hulkenberg on the podium. He's just going to storm ahead.
That's what we want to see.
That would be the most beautiful storyline.
Perfect. Well,
but I think when we talk about how, when we look at history and we look at data, I think Mercedes will be in the mix if something big happens, because Russell is the type of driver who's just always in the right place at the right time. Like, it's always Russell. When there's a big accident, Russell's right there. So yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I've struggled to keep Mercedes out of the books for this one, because now with Verstappen close to a race ban, will he be able to, hold it out and just be clean and not get into any trouble? And if he does, or someone else does, Russell will be right there. So yeah,
time will tell with this weekend. I'm quite looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be good. Well, that's just about it, I think. Thank you for joining me. And yeah, that's for a good one in Austria.
See you guys for the next one.
Yep.